Okay, we are live. Good afternoon, or good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. A little birdie told me that we have registrations from over 37 countries. So thank you all for joining in and tuning in for this webinar. Welcome to the webinar where we are talking about classroom innovation labs, how to pilot, test, and evaluate new EdTech before full adoption. This is going to be a 1 hour discussion where we dive deep into the real life case studies, which are drawn with the wealth of experience that our panelists bring today. Before I introduce our moderator for the day, I wanted to take a quick minute to mention that you will have the Q&A button on the right hand side, or Q&A function on the right hand side of your screen, which you can use to send in your comments, your questions, which we will try our level best to take depending on how much time allows us after the discussion is done. This webinar is being moderated by Shasi Selwan, who is the principal at MLS International Riyadh. She brings with her over 20 years of experience in school leadership, and she has been working across Middle East, Europe, and North America. Her experience includes education system transformation, accreditation readiness, and curriculum design. So you will be in very safe hands. All the panelists are also in very safe hands when it comes to the discussion. And without further ado, I will be handing over to Shasi. Over to you.
Thank you, Shweta. So welcome, everybody. Good afternoon and good morning, good evening, wherever you are with 37. That's amazing, mashallah, 37 countries on participating today. So we want to welcome you to this guest webinar, Classroom Innovation Labs, how to pilot, test, and evaluate new EdTech before full adoption. So again, my name is Dr. Chassie Selwan, and I'm really honored to serve as your moderator for today's discussion. So across today's world, schools are under increasing pressure to innovate, to integrate with emerging technologies, and to prepare students for rapidly evolving futures. Yet many educational institutions continue to face the same challenges. How do we move beyond the excitement, the trends, the vendor promises, we've all been there that are leaders, to ensure that the technology genuinely improves the teaching and learning? How are we making an impact? And too often schools invest significant time, resources, and energies into platforms that ultimately fail to create the sustainable impact that we're looking for. So what begins with quick enthusiasm can very quickly take that turn to become implementation fatigue, fragmented systems, or tools that maybe are even underused after we launch them. So today's conversation is designed to explore different approaches. This session is about moving from impulse adoption to intentional evidence-based implementation. We'll examine how schools can design meaningful pilot programs, evaluate their EdTech through real classroom evidence, engage teachers and partners in innovation, partners in the innovation, and make strategic decisions that prioritize learning outcomes over trends. So most importantly today, our panel brings together an exceptional group of leaders, innovators, and educators and strategists who each bring a very unique perspective from across the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and the wider international education landscape. So together we'll explore not only what a successful innovation looks like, but also the leadership, the culture, the systems, and the change management that's required to sustain it. So now I would like to welcome our distinguished panelists and invite them to introduce themselves. So we will start with Abeda.
Hi everyone, I'm Abida from Dubai. I'm a Senior Director of Digital Technology and AI Implementation at GEMS Wellington International School with many years of experience, and I know some of the other panelists. So hey Steve, how are you doing? Nice to see you again. And yeah, really looking forward to sharing my views here today, and also my experiences, highs and lows. I think if we're talking about the EdTech landscape, we've got to encompass all of that.
All right, Steve.
First, I just want to say, Abada, apparently I've been pronouncing your name wrong the entire time we've known each other, so apologies for that. You should have corrected me.
No worries.
I've been calling you Abeda for years. Sorry. Hi everyone, I'm Steve Banbury. My job title actually changed this year. I'm now head of AI and digital innovation across the JES Dubai School Group. I've been working in education for too long, about 20 years now, and I've been in Dubai since 2008, mostly at JES. I did 11 years at JES and then left and did a bunch of other cool things, and then I rejoined JES a couple of years ago to lead on AI.
Right, Miriam?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Miriam Khalil. I'm Director of Academic Advising and Student Success at Northwestern University in Doha, Qatar. And I have around 20 years of experience in teaching and learning, curriculum, accreditation, and academic advising and student support. And I'm looking forward for the conversation today.
And last but definitely not least, Arifa.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arifa Gora. I'm a middle school teacher and an Apple Distinguished Educator at One World International School in Riyadh. My lens today is on today's conversation is the classroom. I teach every day, and I also do research on how AI can be embedded into learning design rather than bolted on as an extra. I've published 2 classroom studies working with neurodiverse students, as well as integrating AI with lateral thinking across different age groups. So I'm here as somebody who has piloted, tested, and measured, as well as made plenty of mistakes along the way.
That's wonderful. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I'm really excited. So let's go ahead and begin our conversation. So the conversation today centers from moving from impulse adoption into intentional evidence-based EdTech implementation. In your experience, what does it actually look like when a school gets this right? And what is the first shift that leaders need to make? So, and I'm going to actually throw this out to Arifa. You first. We're going to start out with you.
Oh, sorry, was that Arifa or me?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. It should be you, but I do apologize.
That's okay. This is a really good question, and I have a saying, and that is, it should go beyond the transaction. We know that EdTech companies and schools, they have transactions, there's financial agreement, numbers are agreed. But what we need to do is we need to look at the curriculum, deep dive into the curriculum, identify where are the gaps, listen to your teachers, listen to your students, identify where are we looking to improve outcomes, and really measure if the tool or the enhancement that we're going to add will support this. And it's easy to fall into something. The dashboard looks good, it's gamified, it gives you the quick wins, which I do believe sometimes the quick recall in the British examination system is actually effective for students. So I'm very much for this, but we really have to take a step back and check that the curriculum integration is there and it's strong. It's strong. And one of the things that schools would get right is to keep that, the dashboard doesn't just work for an individual class and their teacher. It has to work from a leadership perspective where, a head of department or a head of phase has to look at the data across the whole cohort to identify trends and patterns. And this is where a lot of companies are getting it right at the moment with AI. We're not using AI to measure the student outcomes. We're using AI to measure those interactions and engagements that the students and the staff are having with the platform, and measuring them against those touch points of the year where examinations are happening, where we're looking at data assessment and gathering. So I'm really strong on this in terms of, does it meet the curriculum, and does it meet the needs of the teachers? I think we've all had experience in school, so legacy systems are something that we've all faced. And that you come in, something's been there for 5 years, it must remain. And it's I think as leaders and those EdTech specialists, we have to question it and say, but why? Show me how. And then when you loop it back into student voice, I think that will speak volumes at that stage. And I think explore. And one of the things I'll commend Steve on is we have the AI think tank community here in Dubai, and it's all about sharing best practice, questioning, really having those conversations with other EdTech leaders to bring that advice back into your school to make support of making those decisions.
Yeah, I think that is really, really good points, and tying in from that leadership perspective. Now let's go to Arifa, and I would like to hear you to bring in a little bit of that classroom practitioner practice as well.
Immediately trace the direct line from the tools on my student's screen to a specific learning outcome that I'm trying to achieve as a teacher. When it's wrong, I'm managing another login, another platform, another set of instructions that sit beside my teaching rather than inside or alongside my teaching. And I think the shift is actually a question shift that schools should be approaching, and they should get this right from the beginning. So they should stop asking which AI tools should we be using, and instead they should start asking what are we trying to make possible for learning that we currently cannot. That reframing changed everything for me in my classroom at OS Riyadh. It moved from a procurement-driven decision to a more pedagogic-driven one. And when we designed the PO AI dual loop framework, it started off with a tool. It started with a cognitive goal. How do we stretch adolescents' thinking beyond surface level recall? The AI in the server, the AI then came in to work as our goal instead of replacing it. And again, I think for leaders, I'd say that the shift is from asking teachers to adopt certain tools rather to inventing them to co-design learning systems. That's the cultural shift and not a technical one.
Yeah, I love that. I love that perspective. And we talk so often about giving agency to our children. So you're saying also not only to our students, but to the teachers as well, giving them some agency in what tools they're using. And I think that is such a beautiful concept as well. And actually have the students put in maybe some ideas into what they're using. So with that, let's go into a little bit of all of these different initiatives that go into schools. Many EdTech initiatives begin with excitement, right? Everybody wants to use it. They're ready to go. But they then fail to deliver the meaningful impact, or they become underused after the initial launch. I think we've all been in that situation. Where are schools getting it wrong in the design, the leadership, the implementation, or the evaluation? So, Steve, I'm going to throw that out to you. I think you're muted, Steve.
Yeah, I am. I'm sorry, I didn't mute myself. I don't know who muted me. I think over the years, I think the most common thing that I've seen is that kind of shiny object syndrome, where something new and shiny and this looks cool comes along. And when I left Jess and moved into consultancy here in late 2019, I was going into schools, and at the time in particular, I was known, and still to a degree, I am known as the kind of VR guy, because I was doing so much cool stuff with VR around that time. And I was going to schools, and they're going, "Oh yeah, we want to do all this cool VR stuff," and I'm like, "Hold on a minute, you've got iPads, so they're all sitting in the cupboard, or you've got Office 365, and none of your staff know how to use these things." So they clearly implemented technologies and then not put the time in to actually build strong foundations with them. And in particular, those kinds of systems, your cloud system, your MIS, these sorts of things, that they are not things you're going to change every couple of years. They're going to be there for a while. They've got to be rock solid, and everyone needs to be very confident using them. But then in terms of like your more classroom based implementations, I mean, it's people like me that are the problem, really. Because people like me, especially young me, Because I stood on stage at Guest last year and I was saying, like, I've changed my mindset. I'm now about strategic innovation and slowing down. I used to be very much the Zuckerberg bro. I was move fast and break stuff. Something cool comes along and I wanted to try it. And that has changed. And a lot of that's to do with data protection now, and the fact that we didn't know what we were doing with data back then. And we're very conscious now in the modern world, like, especially with the rise in cybercrime in the education sector, we've got to be much more conscious. But the joke that I make, and it's a joke, but it's true, is 2011, 2012, when we rolled out iPads for the first time in the primary school, I would find apps on a Wednesday night. We'd be using them with kids by Thursday morning. And that will kind of, that all feeds into the same thing. I think the same message from me, which is to slow down a bit. I think there's this rush to jump on bandwagons. There's a rush to not be left behind, especially in places like Dubai and the UAE and the region where it's a broadly private system, and there's that degree of competitiveness, but what happens is you end up with those people like me and the enthusiasts, the tip of the pencil metaphors, who are going to be confident with technology already, so they are going to just see the matrix and it's going to make sense and it's going to be great, and they're also going to have confirmation bias, and they're going to ignore the things that aren't working because they see that for me it works really well, so you just don't get it, but you'll probably get it later on. And there's a lot of difference between a tech enthusiast, a tech integrator, an Apple distinguished educator, a Microsoft educator expert, and your average teacher. And you've got to play to the crowd. You've got to play to everyone. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to scale something. And then what you end up with is what a beta. I'm going to call you a beta again because you've let me call you a beta for too long. Abada. It's going to take me ages to get used to that. Is what Abada alluded to. People measuring adoption rates as success. Yeah. And that's not the case. Like right now, we use Copilot. We're a Microsoft school, so I could easily generate data that shows how many people are using Copilot today as compared to we're using Copilot a year ago. But does that mean that they're using it well? Or does it just mean that kids are spamming Copilot with silly stuff all day? That doesn't tell me anything, really. We need to be focused on, tangible long-term outcomes that where we can see genuine impact on learning or teaching, depending on the nature of the tool.
Yeah, I agree. I think we both were very similar back in those days, and and I think
you and I go back a long way in that regard.
And I think back, we did. Well, look, we would find an app on Tuesday, roll it out on Thursday, and with no really understanding. So I think that's such a good point. And I think that for me too, that was a shift that I had trouble with, is having holding people to the same standard. I mean, just because I could do it, why could they not do it? And I think in my leadership journey, that was something that I had to make that switch, that, what, and I think when we're talking about implementing these EdTech initiatives, a big thing is we have to remember, we expect differentiation from our teachers in the classroom. Guess what? We as leaders need to differentiate for EdTech adoptions as well. We need to realize that not everybody has the same understanding or the foundation. So I think absolutely. And so Miriam, I saw you nodding your head and agreeing with that. Do you want to add maybe just a little something to what Steve was saying?
I want to say that what goes wrong is not at once. It's not one stage only. The breakdown is across all the stages, with misalignment in objectives and trying to rush the implementation to show that we are innovative, that we are not left behind. So again, we need to look at the educators as partners in the process, listen to them, see what they really need before rushing every implementation, because our goal is student success. And if we're not able to use technology to optimize student success, then we're all doing something wrong.
Exactly. Why are we using it? And that moves so beautifully into the next section. I do think about it, Steve, we were very much into quantity of use, not necessarily quality. And I think over the years, we've learned that we need to focus on the quality of the tech that we're using, not the quantity of the tech. And so with that, when we're designing these effective pilots, what does a high quality EdTech pilot actually look like in practice? What are the non-negotiables before we launch one? So Abida, can you take that a little bit? Like, what is the designing? Whoops, sorry. Oh, sorry. So pilot design, digital learning strategy, stakeholder readiness. How do we make sure that that's high quality as well? Oh, I think you have to.
Yeah, sure. I think I'll lead on from the previous question. Oh, unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Got you now.
Okay. I think it would be good to just finish answering the previous question, and that is, when you're introducing a pilot into any school or any cluster of schools, you have to ask yourself what is already there, because the teachers and the stakeholders, they will question it and say, why are we adding this? We already have something. So it's about identifying that this pilot may be replacing, not adding to an existing system. And also one of the things I always bear in mind is where we work in the UAE, I'm sure it's like that in Saudi, we go from FS all the way to year 13. So it's a whole school approach. The budget is all one. So we have to sometimes, some staff are teaching across the school and they may be using double the platforms, and to really make sure that we're not just adding another platform. And maybe with the pilot is to look at the ROI in terms of I'm very much like this, the cost per student. If you're introducing something, I know staff may not be privy to this, but you really have to look at what is the cost per student. For example, in secondary, it should be around or in line with, that from primary. It shouldn't be less than. And we really need to look at, this is me being strategic and me looking at the financial responsibility. But in terms of the other end, what could go wrong? I think don't rush the pilot. We had an amazing pilot that we were starting with our AI core team, and it was with Brisk Education, and really lovely team to work with. And all we wanted to do was we just wanted to feed back to them, what does it mean for our teachers to be using this AI platform? And they were going to feed back and say, this is how I've been using it, to create that more research-based approach. We had a few months of disruption, so we are looking to pick that up, but I won't be rushing that now. What I'll be saying is I need my teachers that I've, part of my AI core team. The AI core team is in our school. From each phase and each department, we, a teacher is volunteered or put forward. We join a working party, and it's all about collaborating. It's all about, making a joint movement of how we use AI in the school together. So when I am doing this pilot, for example, we don't rush it. We keep the communication channel between the company and our teachers that are, taking their time out to be the ambassadors. Keep that open, have focus groups, have conversations. And if we focus on the science of learning and we feed back to how did you use it? And if we get 25 people showing how they use it, we can then measure how we will then decide to use this particular platform. And one of the things I always say to EdTech providers is, I don't promise that we'll be purchasing this, but I do promise that we will run a pilot that is in-depth and that gives you a variety of data, which is empowering for EdTech companies. And when you have that two-way partnership, where, again, I'll go back to the beginning, it isn't just transactional, invoice, raise the PO, make the payment, job's done, a bit of training session at the beginning and we're done. If it goes beyond that, you'll see a lot more staff buy-in. You'll see, a lot more of the outcomes and the successes that you're looking for. And that's my strategy. You never rush it. One size doesn't fit all. So, sometimes I'll get my FS teacher saying, oh, our students don't have devices. And we have to answer that and say, that's okay. We're looking at your professional development. How are we developing you as a teacher? That is also a priority for us. So if this particular tool is helping you with your planning, whether it's being used in the classroom or not is secondary. It's about the teacher first as well.
Yeah, that's great. And so having that adult first or teacher first idea, We are, though, in looking for student success. So I'm going to throw that over to you, Miriam, to kind of go in a little bit more about and invite you to kind of connect this pilot process to student success, advising, and measurable learner impact. But also, while you are talking about that, I want you to kind of go into how do we move beyond just anecdotal success as well and measure if there is really success there. Is the tool really improving teaching and learning? Because like Abida said, like should we continue something just because it was there, right, for 5 years? So I would love to hear your connections on all of this and your input on this.
All right. So from academic advising and student success, it's very important to define what is the problem that we're trying to solve by integrating a new tool. So are my students, for example, finding it difficult to choose elective courses or majors? I'm talking about higher ed right now. Do we have gaps in identifying early academic warnings indicator that is preventing us from intervening in time for the retention and completion of the student? So I identify the problem and then I choose a population of students. I need to be very intentional, like choosing, for example, at-risk student or student who join mid-year, for example. They are late, like in schools, sometimes you have students who do not join with their cohort, they are late to join. So we have to be intentional in choosing a population and then pilot. And then while piloting, we need to track is there behavioral change in the interaction of the student and the engagement of the student to see whether we are achieving the outcome, why we needed the tool from the beginning. If the tool is not able to help me achieve the outcome, then we need probably to look at why it's not. And it's very important to have a good relationship with the platform. Like they should have the ability to adjust to our needs. In many cases, technology is not developed in the same context where it's going to be used. So there are cultural nuances that are missed in the process. There are biases that are there in the process. So the platform should have the ability to adjust and adapt, and we should have an open mindset to accept feedback from all the users and improve the implementation.
Yeah, that's really, really important. And so thinking of that from pilot to scale, and then why does some of the pilots work? I think you kind of started to touch on that. Like, why does some pilots work well in one classroom or with one really enthusiastic teacher, but then struggle when you scale them across, like Abida was saying, when you go from kindergarten to grade 12 or 13. So Steve, can you kind of take that, talk about the scaling, the innovation, and how to avoid these isolated pockets of excellence?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to, the sense that one man can't move a mountain. It doesn't matter how enthusiastic that person is. And I think you can take that in two ways. One, riffing on what you said before, you're right, like I've said for years that the death of innovation is the sentence, but we've always done it that way. And I think that if you don't ensure that you have buy-in at your middle leadership level and potentially at your senior leadership level, depending on the nature of the tool and what it is being used for, then you're kind of doomed from the off. So I now will deliberately seed stuff through the middle leaders, and with the expectation that they will then do their job, and it's their responsibility on their teams. Like we are, as I mentioned, we're a Microsoft school, so in the secondary school where all the kids are on Surface devices, there are digital notebooks and OneNote across the entire curriculum. We make sure we've got one Microsoft Innovative Educator expert in each department, so I've got somebody that I can then seed content to. We have the AI working party, which I use to run pilots and trial new tools, and that is made up of a cross section from across the entire school, and within that as well, there's what I've come to call the lost tribe, which is your admin staff. In most schools, your admin staff is going to make up probably 20-25% of the staff that work for you as a company, as an organization. And those admin staff, the finance team, the marketing team, the administrative teams, if they were in a corporate setting, they'd be getting regular L&D, they'd be getting regular professional development and to build themselves within their own career track. And I think in a lot of schools that doesn't happen, and they can get left behind, and that can actually degrade the impact of the tools that the teachers are using, especially if they they cross the streams between the academic world and the administrative world. If you've got especially older members of staff who've been in their role for a long time, whether they're administrative or academic, they are going to be less open to change. And there's logic to that. If you've been doing something a long way, the same way for a long time, and you're towards the end of your career, you're not going to be as open to, completely reinventing the wheel. When you've got your workflow, you like to come in and get it done the way that you like. We, a couple of years ago, we forced a massive, a whole-scale comms shift to Teams, and we made email for external comms only. And that was because people had that horrible habit of fishing with dynamite with their emails. They're just anybody got any glue sticks? You're sending that to 200 people, including the finance team who are on a different site. And there was a lot of work that needed to be done there in terms of the culture around how we used that particular tool for communication. And if we hadn't taken the time to ensure that the admin side of the admin staff were also on board, it would have degraded the entire thing in terms of how the staff were using it with themselves and the staff were using it with using Teams with the students. Because if the admin team just continue to email them and continue to do things in a different way, it sends the message that maybe we aren't fully on this yet. And similarly with your senior leaders, if you don't get that buy-in from them, if you don't get the support from them, if they continue to just carve their own path, then you're working against yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was some really great points. I think too, a lot of times when schools are implementing new school improvement systems or new school information systems into their adopting new school information systems, that I think you brought up such a good point, that gap between admin and educators. I think that I've experienced that a couple times in my career, seeing that. And I think that is something, and building, I think now with that though, I want to throw this over to Arafa, because how do we build, so he's talking about building that culture and merging and having the culture of everybody in the school. And I guess maybe having the same language, or when you talk about the team switching from Teams to emails, it's putting everybody almost on the same language or same mindset pathway. So when we're doing that, we're trying to bring these innovations in to not only streamline things, but to also innovate. So when we're trying to build that culture of innovation, and teachers are partners, and I think Steve made a good point too, where you talked about getting the middle leaders on board, getting those people that are on the front line, that are the ones that are responsible that are in the thick of it day in, day out. But how do we create that culture where teachers are partners in innovation rather than just the recipients? And here comes another idea that Chassie or Steve or Ebida has put out there, right? It's how do we so as the actual frontline person, you're on the front lines, you're out there every day. How do we take that strategy from the educated, how do we bring that strategy of building that culture?
So this one kind of hits close to home for me, because I think I've seen it on both sides. I've been handed a tool, and then I got that get started email as a teacher, as well as being part of the genuine co-design side. And that difference is the difference in what happens next is enormous. So we are the first Apple distinguished school in Riyadh. And I think that journey tells you everything you need to know about how to build a culture. We didn't get that recognition by purchasing the latest devices or by ticking boxes on an application. We got there because our school made a deliberate choice to put the teachers at the center of innovation. Teachers were given time to explore, freedom to experiment, and most importantly, trust to fail, and to learn from it. That culture was already in place before AI even entered the conversation. So when we did it, we had the foundation ready. That's exactly what allowed me to spend 20 months developing our inclusive AI design framework for the neurodiverse learners, because my school didn't just hand me a tool and said, like, this is what you have to do. Instead, they said, here's a problem worth solving, work on it, test it, come back to us and tell us what you found. That's co-design in action. The framework worked because the culture behind it worked first. Practically, I'd say that there's three things that matter most. First, involve the teachers before procurement, not after. If I'm evaluating a tool for a classroom, I need to test it with my actual students, not sit through a vendor demo. Secondly, I would say create a space where the teachers can say this isn't working without feeling that it would badly reflect on them as a teacher. Implementation fatigue is a real problem, and people won't speak up honestly if they feel that it's risky. Thirdly, protect the teacher's professional judgment. In our research, my contextual knowledge about a student, their mood, their home situation, their learning profiles was always more valuable than anything that AI could produce. The human in the loop isn't a nice idea. That's the whole point. So the simple test is to say that if a teacher can say, I tried this, it didn't work with my students or in my classroom, and here's a list of reasons why, and that's treated as valuable data rather than resistance, you've already got the right culture. That's how you build, that's how we build ours, and that's how we got to being an Apple Distinguished School.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Miriam, I see you nodding your head. Or Abida, go ahead. Go ahead. I see you both nodding your heads.
Let me, I think I hear what Arif was saying, and it's so true. And let me add you a completely different perspective now in terms of what my experience has taught me, and that is, we will always, we will always get companies and edtech companies that will come knocking at the door. And where this year, I've beginning of the year, I've taken on partnerships. So I'm looking at partnerships across the whole school. And sometimes they come knocking and you're like, mid-year, I can't do anything. My department, maths department, for example, are happy. It doesn't have to end there. This is an opportunity to say to these edtech companies that you want to come in and do some work with our curriculum. Do you want to give our students industry experience? Because at the end of the day, they are industry experience, industry experts. Bring them into the classroom. Bring them in, say, let's run a 6-week program.
Yeah.
Let's introduce you to our students, give them a project to work on, and then it loops back in and they present. So what we're doing is we're integrating edtech companies into the larger ecosystem of the school. And for me, we have our edtech platforms that we've committed to. Alongside that, we can be working, and it's those teachers that maybe haven't bought into certain platforms, you'll find that they will buy into these experiences because the curriculum is enhanced, it's more diverse, it's meeting everyone's needs, it's meeting the needs of those students that maybe school is a box for them and it's not the right box for them, and they're ready for the workplace, and it's giving those opportunities in the school environment and in the school system that is making them future ready, making them a little bit more engaged and aware of what is it they want from the world, what is it they want from these companies, and we create something like a 360 feedback loop for these companies. Say, this is what our students thought about your program, about whatever you were delivering, and about what your course, or it just brings that experience. And one of the things we've seen quite fruitful are internships. Through this, a lot of our students are gaining internships with these companies. We can run them in school, in some instances with parental agreement, they can be run out of school. And we're building this mindset of future thinking, of students ready for the workplace in the curriculum. And teachers, it goes beyond teaching, and you'll see the experience. Teachers will be like, oh, I'm enjoying this. This is nice, having another adult that's not a teacher in the classroom, that is also someone who's invested in teaching the students. So that's just me throwing a spanner in there, that there are challenges, but there's so much more you could be doing innovative alongside what you have to do, which is the fun part. And you know, and I really think we need to hold EdTech companies a lot more accountable for what more they can offer us in our schools.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it probably says quite a lot about them if they weren't interested in doing that with you, doesn't it? If they're like, I know, you know, we haven't got time for that, then that tells you that they're just looking for, you know, a paycheck and gone.
Yeah. And I haven't mentioned it till yet, but Steve, you know, our Girls in AI program, I went knocking at the doors of our 4 partners, EdTech, Revision Dojo, University of Birmingham, and Women in AI. I knocked at their door, and the minute I knocked, they all said yes. That speaks volume, because they wanted to be part of an initiative that meant something for 300 girls across the UAE. Over 35 schools all signed up for this, and it meant something. That they didn't need a financial agreement, they didn't need a buy-in, they just believed that student culture and experience, and, you know, giving those opportunities for our students on a level is very important.
And you know, that goes into like a saying, and I used to have in my classroom, don't just tell me, show me, right? And so when we put that out to these companies and say, look, show me, I'll happily write a white paper for anybody if you want to give me the product to test it within my class and get you real data. And you know, Steve, you and I used to make deals like that with companies back in the day all the time. We were like the master testers of the UAE of products. And we would write these white papers and we would put them out and say, this is the data. And we could give you that real product knowledge. Is it going to work in an actual classroom, or is it, because I think, Abida, you said something about sometimes these things are not created for our particular environment, especially here in the MENA or the SWANA region. So it is, you know, it's where we have to make these deals, and you know, and they have to believe in their product enough to share it, right? And I think it says so much. Don't just tell me. Don't just say, here's my in my controlled environment. Show me. Let me use it. Let me get my hands on it. And then we take it into action research. And then what valuable professional development for our staff, because then they get to have the action research and to do the project. You know, how do we remember things? By teaching, right? And so it's the top of the pyramid. Miriam, you were nodding your head too, because we actually have just a little bit of time left on this question. So I want to go ahead and let you speak on this question as well.
I just want to add that in my experience with tech implementation and adoption, the most successful ones were products that were that students worked on to solve a need that they had when they were a student, like a startup coming from a student, because they know what they need, they know what was missing, and they're able to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and I think now actually probably is a good time to take some of these questions, because we have 15 minutes left and there's quite a few questions in here. And then, so if one of these questions, I'm going to read them out. If one of these questions like hit you and you just feel like sparked, please jump in. So we have a question from Midhun, and if I say the names wrong, I do apologize. Like Steve said, we've been calling calling you the wrong name for a long time. So Midhun says, how do you balance the pilot phase with the urgent need for tools in the classroom? Does a 6-week pilot ever feel too slow for the pace of modern ed tech?
Oh, it's very hard to put a kind of a timeline on a sandbox pilot. I think there's so many other factors. It depends on the nature of the tool. You know, depending on the company, there'll be so many constraints that they might force upon you in terms of not just time, but how many licenses you can have, how much you can use it, whether it's free or paid pilot, and that's a whole other can of worms to get into. You know, whether or not you should pay for an initial pilot. Short answer, yes, it's probably all right if you can justify it, but on a very small scale. I think most of the initial pilots that I would do are normally about within the 1 to 2 month timeline. including initial onboarding, orientation, PD, to ensure that the staff involved know at least what they're doing. I think the selection process for who's involved is really important, so you don't roll it out to a team and then they use it once in a month, because you're not going to get enough data to be able to truly inform. And it's really important that you're transparent with them about, you know, their role in the pilot, and the fact that it's integral, that they are, you know, regular users, that they generate enough use cases, and that they essentially, you know, quite often what I say to them is just go and try and break it.
That's right.
Because if you can break it, then a 15-year-old kid's definitely going to break it, you know,
Right.
especially with the AI stuff now. Like, whenever some AI vendor comes at me and, oh, we really want you to try this new app, Steve's like, brilliant. Okay, what's the rudest thing I can type into it? Let me see if I can jailbreak this. Let me do what a 13, 14, 15-year-old boy is going to do if he's got his hands on something like this. Again, in this part of the world where we have Sharia law and Muslim culture, we have to be particularly careful around these types of tools and the Pandora's box that they can, you know, unlock. Yeah, I don't think that 6 weeks, there's anything wrong with 6 weeks, as long as you've considered who's involved with the pilot, as long as you've set very clear parameters in terms of your expectations for their use during that pilot, and that you're flexible enough to pivot. So, for example, you might target, right, I don't know, your maths department or year 6 in your primary school, and say, right, you guys are going to be involved in this pilot, and a week in, something changes, and it's clear that they're just not going to have the bandwidth to use it as much as you originally thought. Perhaps you've gone through one member of their team and they've gone, yeah, but they forgot that they've got tests coming up or something else coming up. Yeah. Having, you know, being flexible enough that you can say, you know what, go back to the vendor and say, look, this team that I've deployed it to, it's not going to work. I'm not going to get enough data. You need to give me another set of licenses. This isn't me trying to scam you. This is me giving you a genuine reason why I need a different team to be added into the mix here.
And I think that's so important. I think that's so important, because setting like a 6-week time, I think you could do it in 6 weeks if you had enough data. And that's the most important thing to remember, that, you know, not having enough data that data gap is not a way to make an informed decision. And so there's another question that kind of goes into this, if anybody wants to go in and dig on that a little further. But Bhavana said, are there any patterns that you see around why some EdTech pilots fail? So common reasons across tools, even the good ones. What are therefore some must-dos to avoid these pitfalls?
I think it's what Steve mentioned earlier, is when are you rolling this out? Is it the pinch point at the beginning of the year? Does it come midway? Is it coming when there are examinations? You know, it's all about what restraints there are in that school calendar that could be meaning that the pilot isn't as effective. So right now, June, anyone comes knocking at the door for June, Steve, we're going to be like switched off. We're at the end of the academic year, so we're not looking at this right now.
Totally. I had people coming at me during distance learning, and I'm saying, are you joking? Like, obviously right now, we're getting no buy-in from this.
Yeah.
But it baffles me that I would have to explain that to them. Surely common sense would kick in and they would realize, oh yeah, it's not the right time.
But then I think that goes back to, like Abida was saying earlier, they were not necessarily always created by educators either, right?
No, true.
And
true.
So a lot of these people are EdTech sales, not educators. And I think if you actually look at the most successful EdTech apps, they were originally educators that have developed these from practical use in the classroom, and it's grown into that. And so with that, Sanith says that, as I was talking about, she said, or they said, as Chassis was highlighted through observations of educational quality and quantitative outcome measurement, The real challenge is not simply introducing another AI or EdTech platform into the classroom, but fundamentally improving teacher effectiveness and measurable learning outcomes. In the context of AI-enabled learning ecosystems, how can institutions build frameworks where AIs act as a teacher co-pilot, enabling educators to spend more time on pedagogy, research, mentorship, and individualized learning support rather than administrative or repetitive tasks? I think that's an amazing question.
I think I could add on to this. So AI tools are fundamentally different from traditional EdTech because of their outputs, and they're non-deterministic, basically meaning that like we don't know what the student's response is going to be until it's there. And that changes the evaluation calculus entirely. With traditional, for example, like quiz platforms and reading apps, you could audit the content once and it would be reasonably confident about the students and what the outcome would be. Whereas with AI, we need to be a bit more specific and we need to have a bit more, how could I say, like we need to be a bit more aware of what we're going to be seeing with the kids. So I would say like 3 steps that you could think of is firstly, the transparency. If all teachers can see what the AI is doing and how to intervene that, if that ticks the box, then if it does not check the box, sorry, then there's a problem. Secondly, the data governance. Generative AI should often send students inputs to external servers. So schools need to know exactly where the data is going to. And thirdly, the bias testing. What are they actually looking at? So if we're looking at, like, for example, in the Middle East, where we're having, most of our schools are international schools and we have multi-diverse students and student groups, we need to make sure that it caters to all of them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And so, someone has asked here, I think that leads into this about with EdTech, it said that as an admin, the tech vendor is knocking and saying they have these innovative solutions. And this is C is the name on here. And they say, who are the people that they should involve in the decision process? And I think we kind of touched on that a little bit, but I think that would be, and with that decision making, he or she also wants to know, what are the KPIs of the successful implementation?
I think it's really, really important that you've got a clear sense of oversight in terms of your EdTech from that, zoomed out umbrella view. Something we've been doing, and when I say we, I'm talking about myself, but primarily Alan Richards, who's director of IT across Jest, is trying to centralize the procurement channels now for all tech, EdTech products, not for the sense that, Alan is going to make the decisions, should we be using this in maths, in science, in geography, but just so that we have a sense of what is actually out there, because your vendors will go, they will cast wide nets. It's quite often in a week, I'll get forwarded emails from a head teacher, from someone, from a teacher, from an admin saying, oh, got this, is it of any interest? And it will be an email I've already received myself, read and gone, not interested in that, deleted it. But of course, they've sent it to everyone that they can get hold of their email address from. And what you end up with is you run the risk of ending up with silos. And silos are really dangerous because you end up with these little silos of excellence, silos of data, silos of use. And I think, again, I think it's the 3rd time I've said this, but in this part of the world, it's also, that issue gets exacerbated because, Dubai, for example, is very transient. We're talking international schools, we're talking international teachers. Teachers come and go. And so you'll get a teacher come in, and you know what I would say, for me, historically, I find that formative assessment tools, they're the worst culprits in this because there's so many of them, and right, they are awesome, and everyone's got their favorite. So you'll get a teacher starts and be like, I'm huge on Nearpod. I love Nearpod. Do we have Nearpod? Can we get Nearpod? Let's buy Nearpod. Everyone should be using Nearpod. And if they get any traction, they might get Nearpod in for their department or for the whole school, and everyone will go Nearpod for a while, and then that teacher who's championed it will leave, and someone else will come in and go, do we not have Pear Deck? I love Pear Deck. I've got all these resources I've built on Pear Deck. I can't use them, and unless we've got Pear Deck, let's get Pear Deck. And suddenly everyone's on Pear Deck for a while. And in some cases, you'll find that that's happening in your schools, and every department's doing something else. So one department's on Pear Deck and one department's on Nearpod, and you're paying for all these different subscriptions when you could centralize that and potentially find that you've got 5 different tools being used across 5 different departments that kind of do the same thing, and that one of them's probably a bit better or a bit more well priced, or just a better investment overall, and an even better investment if you could centralize that and procure more licenses on a cheaper rate. And so I think it's really important that you've got a clear line in terms of who should be involved in that process, though. I think that varies from school to school. For us, we have our IT strategy group, which is myself, director of IT, representatives from the 3 senior leadership teams, the school director, the head of admin, the head of finance, and the network manager.
All right.
I think if you want me to add, or the second part of that question, where they said the case,
that, because I think it's definitely a good topic for us.
Yeah, so I think just everything that Steve said, I mirror that. And I also look at, when you're looking at your KPIs, let's look at safeguarding. Let's look at those, those platforms. Are they resulting in quicker turnarounds in dealing with some of these student issues? So that's your key performance indicator, is that you'll be measuring and monitoring your safeguarding, your reaction to safeguarding across your school, because of this particular platform. Now, it's really time sensitive when you're dealing with safeguarding issues to make sure that that communication is all there for everybody. It's logged, it's protected. We constantly mention data privacy, and I don't think that should be ignored in any of this. And those sort of KPIs for student wellbeing and student culture and experience are hit. With assessment, as Steve just said, it's a tough one, because we know that we're all being externally assessed. But look at the current situation we're in right now, where a lot of our teacher assessed grades are going forward, and that maybe those formative assessments have contributed towards some of the grading that is going there. And then we flip it to learning and teaching. Is how do you measure if a teacher's if the KPIs are effective for learning and teaching outcomes or teacher training? Well, you'll see a lot more teachers will be, if you do your MER process and you look at your observations or your walk-ins and your learning walks, you'll see a culture of teachers taking more risks and teachers maybe improving if that's the cohort you've got. So the KPIs, you're such a good question. Whoever asked that, such a good question. They are measurable. How you measure it is definitely got to be innovative, because you don't always get raw data. But you definitely need to look at the strands of your school and your senior leadership and see how some of these EdTech tools are enhancing it. And there would always be some that you just question, what are you still doing here? And operationally, that's a really important one. So I liked your one, Steve, what you said about the formative assessments, whereas, the tools are different. I'm actually for that. But what I may be looking at is operationally, we shouldn't be on 5 different platforms. We've really got to start streamlining those operational platforms.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Especially, I've been in a situation where when I left and went back to the States for a while, I had 25 schools. So like when you are working on that big of a scale, having that streamlining is so important, having that same concept. We are coming to the end of our panel. I can't believe the time has gone by, but I do want to read one last kind of comment question. Steve, it is from our old friend Stephanie Bernier. She says,
"Oh, hey, Steph."
Yeah, she says, "Hi, Chassie and Steve. It's been a long time. Lovely to see the other members of the panel as well. Just a comment here. I think it's important to also important to consider the length of a pilot to evaluate the level of support that is given from a vendor, i.e. the response time, the level of training materials, how they respond to further suggestions for innovations needed, what the level of support is when things go wrong, and how they resolve it. And I thought that was, like, as always,
it's a very good point.
Something pretty phenomenal there.
We've got a pilot running this year, and we've had technical issues, and the team flew in from Singapore to help us.
And see, that's how you know. That's how you know if you've got, okay, it's not working. We've recently did a new SIS within our school. It didn't work for us. That team immediately jumped in and said, okay, you know what? We'll make it work. We'll change it. We're going to add on this fee. We're going to add on that fee. It's like, how can we make it work for you?
We're learning from you.
Exactly. We will adapt from you. And so that's the biggest thing, I think, is know that innovation cannot really be defined, right? I think that's one of the things we like you've always said, Steve, when we are constantly, we've always done it that way. We just need to say, how can we make it better? How can we use the data? And so I'm going to turn it back over to Sveta and thank everyone on the panel. Really, mashallah, a great conversation. And I think we could probably go another hour.
Yes, I was just going to say, we have discussed a lot and still not enough. 1 hour is it just not make the cut. I know that, but thank you so much for doing this. Thank you, Shazi, for leading it so supremely, as always, being the support. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Abida. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Arifa. Lovely to have you on board with us for this discussion. I saw that the audience has also kind of connected with us on this topic, was engaged. There are a lot of questions that we answered. There are a lot more that we couldn't. I'm so sorry, the ones that we couldn't pick. If any of the audience members would like to ask the questions to the speakers, please email them to us at marketing@guesteducation.com. We will try and get those answers. Now on the screen, you will have the pop-up which says Guest Saudi Arabia. The registrations are open. 4 of these faces out of 5, not Steve, but the other ones you will see at the Saudi conference as well. So
Steve, you need to just come on.
yeah.
I wasn't asked.
The odd one out, yes. And if you want to have,
I've not done Guest Saudi Arabia. That's not ticked off my bingo card. But you have to be asked.
We didn't get the invite, Steve, did we?
I'll be in ISTE in Florida in June, so I'll be quite happy with that one.
So please register for Saudi Arabia, and you will see more of these faces there. And if you like, I mean, these speakers are also on LinkedIn and other platforms. You can connect with them. You can have your conversations more freely without our proctoring. And the recording for this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel and guest website as well. It'll be a couple of days before it gets put on. And you will now be redirected to a survey. Kindly share your feedback. Let us know where we went wrong or what we did right, really. So it just helps us improve the following ones. And you will receive the recording emails by next week. So that's it from me. And thank you so